One, two, three, let's go. Okay, I think we're going live. As always, we're going to give it like 10 seconds. I think we are live. Hello and welcome to Grace over Mr. Friday live stream. Thanks for joining us early today. Well, there is a bit of difference time-wise between UK and Australia. So if you would come in a normal time, you probably would have Matt till early morning next day. So we're going to have Matt a bit earlier today. So if you are late, well, you can always watch us in, on demand, basically. So hello, Matt, how are you?
I am absolutely fabulous, Con. How are you?
I'm very well. Not that well, as is, but thanks for joining us today. I really enjoyed our conversation last week. So before we start, again, I'm going to just mention a couple of things while people are joining us. So first of all, the war in Ukraine, again, supports Ukrainian people. If you can help somehow, I'm not going to ask you to do that, but there are places like Red Cross, UNICEF, Save the Children. If you're in London, you can also bring things like clothes, etc., to different places. So do your search and do help Ukrainian people. In terms of the shop, we have 10% of secondhand DSLR. So if you are looking for a nice DSLR, something like D850 or D800 per se, you can do that and you can get 10% off up to £150. We also buy a lot of secondhand equipment right now. So if you are looking maybe to switch to a Z series cameras, it is a good way to sell your DSLRs or lenses and fund your further purchase. We also have Coffee Fund open. You can send us some coffee via Superchat and PayPal. Thank you everyone who sent us some coffee last week. Unfortunately, I don't have the PayPal names this week, but we will mention them next week. And then we also have some in the comments below. So he will monitor the live chat. Any questions you have for Matt, do put QQQ at the beginning of the question and then the question itself, and then some will pin into the top of the chat. It just will help us to kind of go through the chat and find the questions, etc., etc. So this is the kind of the entry-level stuff. Matt, we all know you, but just in case, again, I'm sure people will just tell us who you are, what you do, and then I'll tell more things about you as well.
Lovely. Well, my name's Matt Irwin. I'm from Australia. I have a little bit of a cold at the moment, so I'm sounding a little bit different. And I had a very big shoot today, and it was like 35 degrees, and I was out in the sun for all of it. So if I nod off, just yell loudly, Con, okay? Okay. I've been a photographer for my entire adult life, so 32 years, and I love it. And I've shot lots of different brands over the years, and I do all sorts of photography from street to lifestyle to portraiture. I've kind of done it all actually in that 3 decades, in my 4th decade now. So that's my story. And you can find me here on YouTube as well, if you didn't know that.
All right. So sorry, Matt. It seems like we are not live for some reason. It says an error occurred. So let me just say, Seth.
I can see us. I've got the live window up, Con, and I can see us.
You can see us. Okay, that's good news. So Seth is saying hi in the chat. Hi, Seth. Thanks for being in our live stream last week.
He's also saying we're live. So we are live.
Okay, well, I hope they're not DDoSing us on the things I have to say. But sure. It's not the censorship. But for some reason, I can't see us live. But thanks, guys, in the chat to confirming that we are live. So Seth is, what did I say? Yeah. Matt is a great YouTuber, great photographer. He has things to say about Nikon equipment. So you use Nikon equipment yourself, isn't it?
Yeah. So I've used everything. I've used actually everything. Canon, Sony. I have an A7R III, for example, at the moment. But Nikon's always been the one that I've just returned to. Even, I'll go off and I'll have a little dalliance with something else, but I always end up back with Nikon. And of course, now the Z9, which just the more I use it, the more I fall in love with it. And I can see you just have one hanging around on the shelf behind you there. Is that right, Con? Just hanging around. Whereas mine,
exactly, casually.
Mine's sitting down here looking tired because it's had a big day with the 70 to 200 on it. So,
well, I'm surprised there's no 400 mil on it, because it seems like 400 mil is, you are the only person in the universe who actually had the chance to use one.
Yeah, well, I mean, far out. If that's true, I feel very lucky, and I tell you, everybody needs to have a go at that lens at least once in their life. Honestly, no exaggeration. Using that lens, there's absolutely optically nothing that I can see that's anything other than, I don't want to say perfect, but it just renders beautifully, and there's nothing that it, you know, that I want it to do that it can't do. So and if you've seen the 2 videos that I've put out so far, I've kind of done almost everything with it that you might do with it. The latest one being about portraiture. It's a fabulous lens. It's clearly designed to go with the Z9. I mean, of course it'll work with all the other cameras, but honestly, it's just such an astonishing system. And, you know, with that portraiture, I had the subject, you know, she was coming towards me, and she's pretty close for a 400mm, and it was still keeping her sharp in focus. About halfway through the video, you can see she's maybe 6 meters or 4 meters away, and it's still tack sharp at 2.8. So, you know, sharpness, speed, chromatic aberration, flaring, you know, all these questions that everyone asks, you don't need to ask. It doesn't exist. It's amazing.
I really enjoyed those
the
people,
sharpness exists. I mean, the flaring and the chromatic aberration, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true. I really enjoy those people eating in a restaurant. I just looking at the model. It's like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of just blow into these locations for, you know, you don't hang around too long, for 10, 15 minutes and sort of take over, and everyone's pulling out their phones, and, you know, it's a bit of fun, but I'm concentrating so hard, I hardly notice what's going on around me, to be honest, because there was a lot of moving parts. You know, I had to worry about the camera, I had to worry about the flash, I had to worry about what our model was doing, and you know, just the surroundings. I mean, I love it. I love it when the ringmaster, you know, you put on your circus master hat and off you go, and I get a great buzz out of that stuff. And of course, the last couple of years, not much of that's happened in my world because we've been in lockdown. So it was just really exciting to be back out on the streets with such superb gear. So yeah, the 400mm ridiculous, and I mean, it's got a pretty ridiculous price tag, but I think its price tag matches its performance.
So basically, if you're into portraiture, this is the lens to buy.
Yep. Or the 50mm 1.2, or, you know, I suppose we're expecting the 85 1.2, you know, if that's what it is. I think we think it's that, considering we've got a 1.8 already.
Yeah. And do you think it's happening soon?
I have no idea, but, you know, it's on the roadmap, and it's been there since maybe the middle of last year. So I'd expect that maybe in the next 3 to 6 months, maybe, you know, who knows? Who knows? True. I mean, I was thinking about this today. I was thinking the Z9's going so crazy that I'd be saying to my factory manager, look, we're selling a lot of these Z9s. Let's just keep the Z9 production line going, because, you know, we're on a good thing.
As you can. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I mean, I'm aware of a lot of people who sort of weren't early in the queue, that they're getting close to getting theirs now. So I do think Nikon are getting them out. I mean, how's it going in the UK? I know last time we talked, there wasn't as many coming through as you'd hope for. Have things improved?
No, it's pretty much the same dribs and drabs, unfortunately. We're looking at a similar situation as we had with D850. I think it's with D850, we got the initial batch was really good. I think is around 50 units or so. And then after that, there were small deliveries of, let's say, 2-3 units every 2 weeks or so. And it's pretty much similar situation is happening right now. It seems that, in the United States, that's where the major deliveries are. And in UK, it is what it is. I mean, UK and Europe is basically in the same situation at the moment. But they are coming in, and hopefully a lot of people will get more of them soon. By the way, speaking of Z9, so how you getting on with this? We spoke about it last time, but do you have any further impressions about the camera?
Yeah, look, I can't really exactly remember what I shared a few weeks ago, but look, the more I hold, you know, I stopped using the full size bodied cameras at the D4, but then I went over to a D800, D810, D850, and they were still bigger than the Z6 and the Z7. And I'm just really enjoying the ergonomics of a larger camera. And I know that might sound weird, but now I'm getting out shooting more because we've been in lockdown for so long. You know, ergonomics is just so critically important, and it's really important to me because everybody shoots differently, but I'm a photographer where a lot of the work that I do, I'm holding and I'm waiting. And if it's not comfortable, it's not easy, and things aren't where you want them to be, you know, it can be tiring quickly. So super enjoying the ergonomics. The focus system just continues to blow my mind. Like in that latest video, you know, you can see Shayla, the model, she walks into shadow, complete 100% shadow. She goes completely dark. She's just a silhouette, and then still the system continues to track her even when it's in complete silhouette. And today the shoot I had was the launch of an organic dog food brand, would you believe, in a park here in Melbourne. And of course, this was the first time I had humans and dogs in the same frame, but I didn't want the humans. I wanted the dogs. So I put it onto Animal Detect, and there you go. It just found the dogs. And it was like, well, that's new. And so, yeah, no, there is more things. So I've used it more in professional work settings, and it is like the focus is ridiculously simple. I love the long battery life. Just everything. I mean, throw something at me and I'll tell you whether I think it's awesome or not.
Well, I'm thinking, the one thing I found really cool is, if you, let's say, come back from the shoot and you just plug your camera like you would plug your phone into USB-C cable, and, instead of just removing the, the battery and putting it on the charger, you basically just plug it like your phone and it's just charging it up, and, like you take it the next day with you, it's fully charged. It's not like it needs a charge because the battery life is huge, but it is amazing. One thing I want to ask you, do you think they can improve on something there, or what would you want them to improve? Maybe via firmware update, maybe via something else.
And people accuse me of being a Nikon fanboy, and I'm not. I run small business, and I'm a glass half full person. That's my personality type. So I don't often lean into, geez, this really sucks. I really wish they'd change this. My brain just doesn't think that way. It's like, I've got a great tool. How do I exploit it? That is how small business works. It's like, I've got an opportunity. How do I absolutely maximize it? So let's run through focus. No, focus is awesome. Ergonomics, awesome. There was something I was thinking about today that it was like, I wish that was a slightly different button combo or something, but I can't remember. Like, Con, I've been doing this so long that cameras were so difficult to use 35, 40 years ago when I was using my Pentax K1000, and it's like everything is, remember focus was the circle with the thing,
Yes.
And it's like, this is like fantasy land now. So honestly, I'm just a glass half full guy, and I might think of some things as we go through. I'm sorry, I didn't make a list, but but we are spoiled. We are spoiled with technology. It's incredible things to have, because, as I say, I don't shoot wildlife, and we took it out to the pond, and there were some birds in there, and suddenly I became a really good wildlife photographer, because all I had to do is just press. You said to continuous and animal recognition, and press AF on button. I just hold it constantly pressed. So and it would just track the subject, and all I had to do is just press the button and take the shot, and suddenly all shots look sharp. It's something like early cameras, even let's say you look at something like D850 or something, you would still have to do a lot more work. So it's just so easy nowadays. It's incredible. Look, I think the only thing that I haven't wanted is the 20 frames per second. Like that shoot, the video I put up last night, I did do some of it. I did the last. So I'll tell you a weird statistic. I shot 70% of it just at single, press as you go. And I shot the last, let's say, 30% with 20 frames a second. And I shot 75% of the images were in that last 30%, or maybe more, because, you just hold your finger down for a second and you've got 20 shots. And then I'm like, I didn't even go through them all, because it's not a bird in flight. It's like, so it's not necessary for that type of photography. And I'm so used to just pressing one button at a time. That's what I've done for all these years. Just waiting for the definitive moment. I mean, that's part of the joy for me of being a photographer, is looking and waiting for that definitive moment to come. And that's not a criticism. 20 frames a second has its place, and some people will use it, but that's the only thing where I've gone, I'm actually going to go into the menu and turn it down to 5 or 10. I know there's some other options. So I might, if I go continuous, I'll just slow it down a little bit. It's just because it takes up a lot of hard drive space. And the only other thing I'd like to see happen, actually, you've got me now, you've got me rolling, is I don't think Capture One supports the high efficiency star yet. So,
I see. So we're waiting for update.
I'd really like to use that, because, we've basically been told the files are near on the same, or pretty much the same, indistinguishably the same. So why not use it and save a third of your hard drive? I would love to get into that. So I don't know I don't know whether that's Nikon side or Capture One side, or there's that third party that actually made that technology.
That's true.
What were they? Nico? I can't remember what it's called, but
oh yes,
maybe Seth can tell us. Seth, do you know anything about Capture One getting into high efficiency RAW? Shout it out anyway. Yeah. So otherwise, I've just really enjoyed it. Like, it's just joy. And that's the vibe I'm getting from people in my comments. There's more and more people getting them. And yeah, I don't pick up the other cameras anymore, the Z6, the Z7. They've become the B cameras.
Well, pretty much, yeah. I mean, the camera does everything you need, isn't it? But you mentioned 20 frames per second. There's a cool video by Bill Maynard at Cool Wildlife Photography. He's actually using 120 frames per second and for birds in flight.
Yep.
And then he basically says, well, look, yes, I do get 11 megapixel files, which is maybe not that large, but then you can use software like what's called Gigapixel AI, or back in the day, I used to use this kind of software called Genuine Fractals back in the day. I think it no longer exists, but you can do that. And he says, I couldn't, even with 20 frames, I couldn't get the right angle of the wings of the birds, and now I can. So it's incredible what you can do with this camera if you need to. And for portrait person like me, I barely would shoot even at 5 frames per second normally, So the options are there. And if you're looking at all-in-one camera, I think this is basically a fantastic choice, isn't it?
It's a ridiculous all-rounder. And when I do my sort of first full review after, let's say, 3 months, that's going to be the headline. Like, there is no more of a Swiss Army knife. You've got 8K, you've got, I mean, it ticks all the boxes. You've got high resolution, high speed, 8K, probably indestructible body, extraordinarily long battery life, and you've got the Z mount, which not only allows you to have all the amazing Z glass and F glass, but it also allows you to have EF glass and E mount glass, and you can mount so many different systems onto it. So, and that's actually something that I think is pretty potent to go. You know what? I really like this exotic lens, and I can mount it on my camera. That's an exotically exciting 8K camera. I mean, you were telling us in the last episode how filmmakers love certain pieces of glass, and they'll work out how to mount it onto whatever, if they're using a red or whatever. So I like the fact that it's a very adaptable mount. So you can't lose. Plus, of course, just to keep the rumors moving, of course, there'll be a medium format one day, right? Right.
We got to leave it for the end of the conversation, because
later.
That's going to take us about 2-3 hours, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's the black box conversation.
Exactly.
So look, they've done really well, and I mean, I don't know what to say. I've used it at the cricket, so I'm going to do a full review of the 400mm as well, and so there's more stuff I haven't shown yet, and some of it's cricket. So I've used it in lots of different, like, as in the sport cricket, not little baby crickets. They're great. I mean, and the Z9 and that lens together just really shows, what the hell's the future hold. Like the 800mm PF that we know is somewhere soon, and maybe a 400mm PF. It's just getting better and better with each lens release. So for wildlife and sports, it's huge.
That's true. Before we move to that, there's a question from the chat. Someone is asking, so it's Pierre-Louis Herin asks, what is the minimum storage recommended of the CFexpress card for Nikon Z9? So what cards do you use yourself?
So, look, I've been lucky to be sent cards, and really, like, I used Per-Gear cards, for example. There's a Per-Gear card. SanDisk cards. What's that other one? The one I did. So really it comes down to, if you want to have sustained 20 frames per second in RAW, then you need the best cards money can buy to maintain that as long as possible. If you're going to shoot in the high efficiency Star, we know that Matt Granger and others have tested that out, and you can get pretty, like, I don't know, what was it? He got 1,800 frames before he just thought he'd give up. It
basically was unstoppable, isn't it? Yeah.
Unstoppable. So, I mean, this card here is slow. I have tested this card. It's a 64 gig. It's very cheap. It's like $69 or $99 or something.
No, it's
reasonable. And that won't give you high speeds. So you've just got, if you're buying a Z9, you've just got to decide how are you using it. And most people will probably want to use high frame rates. And thus you do have to look very specifically at getting the card with not just high speed read and write, but sustained high speed read and write. And, you know, I think the theory is that the distance between the sensor and the storage is very short. There's kind of maybe not really much of a buffer there. And we're aware that Angel Bird has released a new series of cards very recently in the last couple of weeks. And they're Gen 2 of CFexpress Type B, and they're even faster. And so what I'm theorizing is that could mean things could get even faster because the cards have gotten faster. Because I feel like there's not really much blockage between the sensor and the storage. Because as we know, there's not blockage between, there's not much buffering between the sensor and the EVF, although the EVF is lower resolution than the storage. But anyway, you know what I'm saying there. So
that's true.
If you want the fastest speed, buy the fastest card, and any of the brands that we all talk about and hear about, Angel Bird or what are some of the others? Well, I mean, what do you guys sell?
Devices Black is the one that we sell in UK, and it's really, really fast. So Richard tested it. He really said it's one of the best ones in UK.
Sorry, you said the Delkin?
Yeah, I think it's Delkin Devices Black card.
Yep. And there's one other that I'm trying to think of, and I've just forgotten what it's called.
Yeah,
but,
I'm thinking the only one I didn't like, we had the Lexa CFexpress card, and it was just getting really, really hot. And it's not only in Z9, but Z6 as well. I don't know why, but if you're recording 4K in it, you take it out, and it's like, you know, it's just hot to hold. So I don't know what's...
Yeah, well, I have the same thing that some of the cards get hot. Do you have cards that don't get warm? Are you saying some cards don't heat up at all?
Well, no, they are warm, but not as like, you know, piping hot.
Not burning.
Like the Lexa card. Yeah, that one was, you know, I thought it was just a bit scary, you know. So I had to give it a break next to the window just to chill a little bit, you know.
Yeah, if you can cook an egg on it, then that's probably, don't buy that one. Don't buy that one.
Absolutely. Yep. There was also a question about high efficiency RAWs at Z9, and the question was from John Hughes. He's asking, do you think they can implement the high efficiency RAW in via firmware updates on existing cameras, or do you think it's going to be a hardware, basically going to be released with a new hardware?
Well, my theory is like JPEG, it actually takes a fair bit of computing power to create the JPEG. Back in the day, obviously, it's not the case now. It may well be that it takes a fair bit of power to create that file on the fly, and thus that the older processors can't do it. That's a theory. I have no idea at all, but it is a compressed format, right? And it's got to be shot, analyzed, compressed, and saved. And that's what, and that is why it's smaller, which means it's doing that analysis on the fly at 20 frames per second.
That's true.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
I suppose they could slow it down. I suppose you could go, we're going to go at 1 frame a second, then you're getting high efficiency stuff. My guess is some commercial realities come into it where it's like, yes, we can do it, but you know, this is new tech, so come on, we're not going to put it in a Z6, you know.
That's true. That's true.
You know what I mean?
The easiest analogy would be as well for people, let's say if you're archiving something on your computer, let's say if you've got an old computer, it's going to take, let's say, maybe 1 minute to archive, and you got let's say the latest computer is going to take 15 seconds to archive. So it's obviously happening much faster in camera to the files, and obviously at 20 frames per second, as Matt mentioned. So, you know, it's all happening basically in real time. And let's say maybe the cameras that currently exist, a part of Z9, maybe they're not fast enough to implement that feature. So I personally agree with you. I think it's going to be a future hardware update. So whichever cameras we're going to get next, they will have that feature, regardless of if it's going to be entry level or, let's say, you know, or let's say whatever Z8 it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, you know, there's no formal word on the firmware updates for the 2s, right? The Z6 II and the Z7 II. Who knows why that is? You know, you could see it being in there. It's just a matter of like, is it necessary? You know, like, I think part of Nikon's thinking might have been, you've got this camera that shoots at 20 frames per second, and now you're just going to fill your hard drive up like crazy. All right, Barry in R&D, can you work out a way that people's hard drives don't break? I mean, we're not really into it, but you know, let's work out a way. So they worked out a way, right? Which is creating essentially a raw file that's 60% the size. So they might just think it's unnecessary for a Z7 II and a Z6 II as well. And I can see that argument.
How do you feel psychologically shooting high efficiency RAW? I generally, try to shoot the best RAW I possibly can. So let's say on D850, I was shooting uncompressed RAW. And I know that lossless was about the same. It's just psychologically, I want to get the biggest file I could get, yada, yada, yada. So how do you feel about the, high efficiency RAW? If, let's say, you're shooting a portrait, do you still stick to a normal RAW instead of high efficiency? Or do you just leave it at high efficiency star and just leave it at that?
Yeah, you and I, we're cut from the same stone. For sure. I buy good cameras and good lenses. I may as well record all this stuff as well as I can, right? But I've seen a couple of people, looking at the differences between them, and yep.
Yeah, my dog.
Yeah, so I've there's he's just run away. But anyway, a couple of people have looked at the differences between them, and the differences seem to be basically you can't see the differences between them. So what I just said there is a few people have tested them and they can't, you can't see the difference. So because Capture One doesn't process them yet, I don't do it, and I won't do it until Capture One processes them. So I'm not using them. And once it does, well, I'll do some testing, and I suspect for the work that I do for like my streetscape, cityscape that can get blown up over 2 meters, I'll continue to shoot RAW. For client work where I'm just, it's an event or something that just it's never going to end up big, then absolutely. Like why? Like, because I did very rarely sometimes go, oh, this is, these guys are never going to use RAWs. I'll shoot it in JPEG. And it's basically a great version of JPEG. So, I mean, it's a ridiculously awesome, much better version of JPEG because it's still a RAW file. Like you still get all that recoverable information, and you don't have a baked in file color temperature and sharpening and all that stuff. So I think it's an amazing thing they've done there, and they need to get rolling out compatibility with all the other software manufacturers so we can actually use it across the board. So I think it's great.
That's true. And I think
which is why I brought it up, because I genuinely would use it. Like I'm starting to do shoots now. Like the shoot I did today, they don't need full RAW. High efficiency star would be perfect, and I'd be happy to save the space.
And generally, your exposure is going to be more or less the same. And if the camera has like 14, 15 stops of dynamic range, you're not going to be hugely underexposed and overexposing. So you won't need to pull up as much details, let's say in highlights or shadows. So generally, I'd say high efficiency probably will cope good enough with that, isn't it?
Well, from what I understand, and I haven't tested it, is that it's the same. I don't know if it throws away dynamic range. I mean, I'm not aware. You might be aware. You might have looked at it, but I've seen people testing it saying it's the same. So I don't know. Has anyone else in the comments? Let us know out there. Yeah. Seth, have you played with it? Anyone else out there played with it? The high efficiency star and the difference?
I mean, from personal experience, I tried to, just move the sliders around on shadows and highlights. And yeah, they look pretty much the same as RAW files. So I don't think there's going to be any difference whatsoever.
Yeah, cool.
All right, well, let's move on to the lenses. So since you mentioned PF lenses, obviously you had 400mm now, and you told me that you enjoyed the 300 f-mount f4 lens, which is a PF lens. So
yes.
What do you think about the upcoming 800mm? So that should have this fluoride technology, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry, it should have the which technology?
Well, it should have Fresnel elements and should have fluoride as well there. So it should have all of them, which technically should make it small and light. And we hope it's going to be reasonably inexpensive. So we at least comparing to the price of 800 Canon lens, which is 5.6 and not 6.3, and which is 17,000 pounds. So the general hope is that because it's FL and PF lens, it should be a little bit cheaper than that.
Yeah. So what's the 500? Let's talk pounds, because you know the price of the 500 PF. What's a 500 PF?
I think it's about $3,500 or so.
So would you expect it to come in at like 6 then? 3.5, 6?
I think it's going to be more, personally. I think, a lot of people, the consensus between, let's say, 8 and 12K. I personally think, if you're going to get it to maybe 8K, that would be great, but they could go a little bit more. I mean, they're not going to lose if they price the lens below Canon lens. And I know it's 5.6 with a 6.3, but at the same time, because Nikon doesn't have anything equivalent to that, low price will look like a win for Nikon in a way.
Yeah, and that difference is small, isn't it? The 5.6 to 6.3, is that a third of a stop, or I can't remember. It's about tiny. That, so Yes. Look, my field of experience starts to reach the glass ceiling once we get over 400. I've never shot with anything bigger than a 600. So to even hold an 800 will probably make me sweat. But yeah, looking at the shadow, the charts, the roadmap, it certainly looks, doesn't it? It looks sort of similar to the 400 2.8, doesn't it? It's not much bigger or similar. I haven't looked at it recently.
Yeah, it looks like
look, I have high expectations.
Larger.
Say that again.
It looks like just a 1 centimeter larger than 400 mil.
Yeah, there you go.
At least on the roadmap. Yeah.
So I've used the 500, and I've actually borrowed from Nikon Professional Services the 300, and I shot an episode with it, and it looks so good, and I had never realized how ridiculous that little, like it's smaller than a 24 to 70. So everybody, if you haven't played with one, it's smaller than a 24 to 70 zoom, and it's a 300 mil f4. It's ridiculous, and the quality is extraordinary. So let's assume that we go from the F mount lens, PF lenses, which are fabulous, and then we're going now to a Z mount version. Well, I have pretty high expectations, is what I would say, Con. Like, I have no idea, but I have pretty high expectations.
What was the best F-mount lens you've tried on that camera? And how do you think about using F-mount lenses or cameras? Do they feel the same, or you feel a little bit that they're lagging behind the Z lenses?
Oh, are the same as Z lenses, or the same as when they were on an F camera?
Both. I would say both.
Okay, well, the answer would be that, for example, with the cricket thing I did recently, I had the 400 2.8 current Z version, and I had a 2 version old 400 2.8 that a lovely man let me try out. And I tell you, that lens, we were both, I mean, wait till you see the video, but we were both in shock as to, 1, how fast it was, and 2, how good it looked. And I've had a bit of a look at the pictures. And so that 2 generation, and I'm not an expert on the 400 2.8s. Do you know what the two back was? Do you know that, Con?
Sorry, say again. 400 mil, which one? F-mount version?
400 2.8, 2 generations back.
Okay, so they had the current 400 is E F-mount version, and the previous one was GVR. So it was a bit heavier compared to the current F-mount version. Yeah,
okay. I don't remember which one it was, but it was performing outstandingly, and and I think it's from 2014. So the question was, let's get back to that question. So I'll start with what I know really well, that F-mount lenses perform the same, if not better, on Z, because you get things like in-body image stabilization as an advantage. But we're also starting to see that that some lenses are actually faster at focusing or something. Like, who did a test? Somebody did a test. Some wildlife photographer did a test, and some of the lenses were, faster. So, it was faster going from full focus to
infinity. Okay,
from going through the range,
distance to infinity.
So, there is no penalty. I have not come across any penalties at all ever for using F on Z. And what's the other question?
Well, the question is, what lens impressed you on that camera? What F-mount lens you would consider, the one, at least from the ones you tried on your Z9, which F-mount lens performed the best? So it's the question from our viewer. I think it was Ray, if I missed it. Yeah.
Hi, Ray. Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, optically, the lenses are the same. There is no optical change. It's the F to Z adapter is basically the mirror box and all that stuff. So it performs identically optically. And so then you've got to say to yourself, well, for example, I use tilt shift lenses. On my D850, there's no stabilization, no in-body image stabilization. Well, I get in-body image stabilization with all of the Z cameras. Well, not all of them, but, the 35mm ones. So, I think that's a great advantage, but I couldn't say one that's done better. They all just perform the same as on F, but in some cases, the focus seems to be even faster. And of course, you now get eye detect. And so I used the 300 PF to record myself in an episode 2 episodes ago with the eye detect on. Did it? Worked. It's a bit noisier, but it's 300, so I was miles away. You couldn't hear it. I was literally 10 meters away from the camera. So no, I couldn't tell you one lens. I think they all benefit from the Z, depending on what you're shooting and how you're shooting.
I see. There's an interesting discussion in the chat that's happening right now about the price of upcoming 800 mil, and there's a range of prices, anything, let's say, from $6,000 to about $10,000. So you name it.
Yeah, sorry. What was the price range?
Anything between 6K to 10K, basically.
Yeah. Well, look. I mean, I don't know anything about. Has there ever been an 800 PF before?
No, they had 500 PF. That's kind of the first they went with it. So 800 is going to be the first of a kind in a way.
So if I was Nikon, and that's all we can guess at. If I was Nikon, I would go. So tell me how much con is the 300 PF?
So 300 PF, current price. Okay, I got the second-hand price here. Let's have a look. So it looks like it's around £1,600, so 1,600 or so.
And sorry, the 500 was how much?
500 is roughly about 3.5.
So it doubles in price.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say it's going to double in price from the 500. So it'll be 7,000.
7,000, yeah. Plus whatever inflation, etc. So we're going to add another 1K on top.
Yeah, all right. Give me another 10% because it's a Z lens and
that's true.
And inflation and whatever. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, well, let's ask ourselves the question: what's the difference between, say, the current 70 to 200 and the FLED 70 to 200? Because they look like the prices were staying much the same up until recently.
Yeah, I think that the main difference is obviously the F-mount version doesn't retail at RRP anymore. So if RRPs will be about the same, it still retails cheaper nowadays than the Z version. Obviously, Z version, Z lenses tend to stay at RRPs for some reason in UK. At least.
Of course, yeah. So what's the real world price difference? Is it a 10%?
Yeah, you're looking something about maybe anything between 10 to 20% between the price of F-mount version and Z-mount version.
All right, I'm going to say 8 for the 8. I'm going to say 8K for £8,000. I don't know what that will can anyone translate that to US dollars? £8,000 for 800 mil.
How are the prices in Australia, by the way? Are you guys paying a lot more than, let's say, in US or in UK?
How many pounds is a Z9?
At the moment, I think it's 5,399.
Yeah, so you're similar to the US. The RRP is $9,000, so it's seemingly expensive, but it's just to do with exchange rates. That's just how our dollar is relative to the US dollar at the moment. There was a time where
tax is?
That's inclusive of sale tax. So yes, that would mean it's like 8.3. So it's because our GST, which is the same as your VAT, is 10%.
Okay, it's not bad. I'm just looking at the conversion now. So you're paying roughly about £5,000, and we pay 5,300, 5,400. So okay, so that's more or less the same, I would say.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, if like, to me the PFs are so little, and there's obviously not as much going on inside them, and I think the 800 will be an extraordinarily popular lens with wildlife, birders, sports. I just want to get it out there. I'd want to sell it. Now, of course, it's a good place to make.
As well, I would say.
Say that again. And
portraiture as well.
Yeah. Oh, I'll give it a go.
I'm sure you will.
I will. I'll be standing on the other side of a river. Yeah. I don't know. I would I believe the Z9's been priced very well.
Oh yes.
At I think they've come in with a great price to excite the market. I would probably, and of course, there, as we were talking about the Canons, and they've got their 800 now. If they could do something that it's like you've got the Z9 and you've got an 800 PF that's almost exactly the same as the Canon, and it's like half the price. If they did that, it'd be like people would be going like, this is a reason to switch, and that's the sort of thing you've got to think about if you're in the Nikon boardroom. How do we get some people, here and there, and people who buy these lenses, they're expensive, so they're big purchases, and they've got a lot of money. They'll presumably buy one or two. I don't know.
Do you think they'll ever release the 1200 millimeter lens as well, like Canons?
Have they had them in the past?
No, well, they had 1200 to 1700 zoom lens, which was a bazooka. Wow. It was a huge thing, and it was as well kind of. I think it was sold like it wasn't manufacturing quantities. You really had to order it from Nikon and then wait for 6 months like to get delivered, and they're rare as hell. So but you can find them if you Google them on the in image search. You will see those, but. So technically, yes, they can manufacture it, but do you think they'll ever will? Because it looks like a very low quantity item in a way.
Yeah, I would think in the world we're living in right now, diminished market, freight, difficulties with freight, the idea of built-in teleconverters, the idea of higher megapixels allowing you to crop your sensor to give you more reach. Even so, some people are not happy with that notion that you'll crop your sensor to give you more reach. No one's saying it's a longer lens, but it gives you effectively the same result. Because, a camera like the D500 has been hugely popular and it's only 20 whatever megapixels. Well, you can throw your Z9 in and make it a D500. So why isn't that a valid way to shoot? And, 800 mils becomes 1200.
Yeah, that's true.
And then if they made a traditional 800 and put a teleconverter in it, then what does that become? 1200 times 1.
You can push it further. Absolutely.
A lot, or you can put a 2 times tele on it. I mean, I stuck the 2 times tele on the 400 through the tele, and then you go into DX and you're at like 2000 mils, and it's just I can't even control the camera anymore. Like you blink and the camera moves. So I would say not in the next 5 years.
I agree. I totally agree with you on this one. Let's talk about some other lenses. You recently did a review of Viltrox lenses, lenses, and you compared them with the 50mm Z lens. What do you think about this influx of third-party lenses coming to the market? We had Voigtlander now released one, and now it's another 3 lenses that come in. We have Viltrox, we have Yungyo, and I think TTRs are now also planning to release autofocus lenses. So obviously those are reverse engineered. They're not licensed under Nikon agreement, but they are coming. What do you think about this, increase of those lenses coming to the market at the moment?
Look, I think it's great. I mean, for us guys who have channels, we'll often get the trolls, and one of the things they complain about is, there's no third-party support for Nikon Z-mount. It's like, well, no, you're actually wrong. Have you gone and looked? Oh, no, I didn't look. I didn't know there were 7 different brands and some of them actually, yeah. So no. Look, it's the Viltrox lenses are actually quite good. I think the 50mm is perhaps one of the best ones they've put out to date. And it's still got the same differences, but I think they've narrowed the gap between the 50mm 1.8, which of course is now, 3 and a bit years old, the Z version. So it's given them more time to reverse engineer and work on their processes and so on at Viltrox. No, I think it's just good for the market. I think it's good for people who, they might just want to buy a Z50 and a couple, the kit lens and then a couple of other affordable primes that are from a third party. And I've used most of the Viltrox lenses and they're fine. I mean, it's all. I'm a professional photographer, so I invest in first-party glass because I want it to last as long as possible. I want it to, be compatible as long as possible. I want it to be weather sealed, and so on. And like the Viltrox, you're probably not quite as comfortable with the warranty. They're not weather sealed. You don't know whether the firmware is going to brick it at some point. And so they're the things you think about more than the optical. That's what I think about more than the optical differences. The optical differences are there, but I don't think for most people it's a big deal. So I think it's great for the market to have an option, a third-party option. And, there was the rumor that Sigma was coming out with a new mount and then it ended up being Fuji.
Yes.
That was a bit annoying. But, clearly Nikon and Canon are not going there yet. So...
But Sigma CEO mentioned in the interview that they are open for support for other mounts as well. And it seems like if you're looking at now, obviously they have Sony, they have now Fuji. So it seems that we only have Nikon and Canon left. So I hopefully it's going to be Nikon, of course, but you never know. And then, as you say, it's always good to have different price entries so you don't need to spend, let's say, £600 and get a Nikon lens. You can spend £400 and get Viltrox, something to get you started. And if it's going to get you into photography, so you can start to take pictures and maybe take it professionally at some point and start to earn money from it, then you will invest in the better lenses later on. But one thing I never thought of is, and that's something that you mentioned, also Seth mentioned last time, is the firmware upgrade potentially breaking the compatibility with the camera. And that's something I didn't think of in F-mount lenses, because F-mount Tamron and Sigma lenses, they would just work straight out of the box. There was never an issue. And I know that Tamron lenses, F-mount lenses, had difficulties, macro lenses, with Z cameras, and I think they had to issue some firmware updates as well. But it is an interesting one, and you're right. If you think that they have to reverse engineer the protocol, so it's not actually a direct license from Nikon, then you're right. Any firmware can potentially break a compatibility.
Yeah, and the other thing that's changed between F-mount and now is back in the day, they would release a camera and they would very rarely firmware update them unless there was a serious bug. Now firmware updates is actually part of the purchase price. It's like we will get a few years of upgrades. So, I mean, how many firmware updates have we seen for, a D4 or whatever? And the only ones we've seen lately is just to get to use the new CFexpress cards in like the D850 and whatever. Otherwise, they make them so well and they test them so much. And look, they weren't supercomputers like the cameras are now. And no disrespect to Canon or Nikon or anybody else, but if they want to release a firmware update that bricks third-party lenses that they're not happy with, that's totally they're totally entitled to do that. So,
but do you think it would be on purpose, though? I wonder if it's just something they change in the protocols that would break the lens. I don't think they would test those lenses on the cameras.
Yeah, look, I have no idea whether it's on purpose or not. It's the sort of thing Microsoft used to do all the time to their third-party suppliers, is not let this browser work on their operating system so that they could get dominance with their own operating system. No. Look, I'm not saying that, but it's possible. Like who knows, Con, whether that happens or not? Because why would the protocols change? You got a 50 mil 1.8, you talk XYZ, blah blah. Go forwards, go back, go forward. Like all it does is focus in two directions, right? I'm not a computer programmer. It's not that complicated. I can't imagine that and unless there's things like they've worked out how to, ramp the speed up more gently, change, like we will go slow, fast, slow. But even then. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I have no idea. This is all just wild speculation at this point in time.
No, you're right. Because if they would change the protocol, then you'd have to update each firmware, which individual lens that already exists. That's another thing. So
I think you could I think Nikon would be able to update the lenses firmware without you knowing.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
They've done it in the past. Well, they've changed the change log in the past, so we've seen that. But
also, I suppose what I mean is let's say they want to, I'm pretty sure I've read that if there's updates for your lenses, you just put them on, and or do you have to download those updates separately, like you do
Well, generally,
I haven't done any updates for my Z
lenses. You would have to download the firmware update for the lens. At least with other brands, that's the common thing. And obviously for F-mount lenses, I know that when 300 came out, there was some firmware issue, the PF lens, and then you would have to send it to Nikon for update. But with that lenses, you can actually update the lens via, just memory card, basically.
Yeah.
But you're right. In terms of focusing, I think there are lots of focusing improvements also happening with the video work to make the focusing between the subjects more natural. So, so there would be less, let's say, jiggity, and it would kind of go much smoother, let's say, from the closer subject to the longest.
Absolutely.
A lot of people asking, is there any reason to buy F-mount lenses if you have Z camera, and would you go with the Z one? I mean, I know the answer, but if you tell us as well.
Look, F lenses work great, and the only reason I would start to transition to Z is because the Z lenses are even better, and they in some cases, like I own a lot of the 1.4 F primes, and the Z 1.8 primes are far like on every metric they're better except for the 1.8 versus the 1.4, which is only 2/3 of a stop anyway. So and of course, like an 85 1.4 F mount, they were quite expensive in the day, and of course the 85 1.8 Z is a lot cheaper, and it's a far better lens. So they're far better lenses. All of them are far better. The only one, there's a few that, like the FLED, the 70 to 200 FLED, which only came out not that long ago, is is pretty, you know, obviously there's a lot of technology in that's in the new one. So you can't see as big a difference, but it's some of the other lenses, the differences are quite huge. So I would slowly transition, but they all work as you would expect, the same on your Z as they do on your F.
That's true.
Except for the screw focus ones, of course.
That's true. So we would say if you go with a AFS glass, let's say if you're on a budget, it's a good option because you can get those lenses, something like 14-24 or 24-72.8 lenses F mount. They can be had on a second-hand market a lot cheaper compared to a Z mount version. So it's a good way to acquire really good glass, professional glass, 2.8 zoom glass, on a budget. And then, again, if you're a professional photographer, you start to work with those and then eventually upgrade to native Z-mount lenses. Let's move on to other brands. You were one of the pioneers who was saying that, look, guys, there's no point of being blindly loyal to one brand. Let's all be friends. And, if you use other brands, that's absolutely fine. You're welcome to the community. Tell me, let's talk about just general kind of industry. What do you think the future holds? And let's start with the smallest formats and just move on to eventual medium format that we're probably going to spend the rest of our talk on to. But let's start with Micro Four Thirds and recent Olympus releases and also Panasonic GH6 releases. What do you think? Is there future for Micro Four Thirds?
Yeah, look, I've personally never been attracted to those formats, and it might be because I started shooting on 35mm film a long time ago, almost 40 years ago, and that's what I was used to. That's how that's how I read the lenses and understood the lenses and, X, Y, Z, all that stuff. And then what was it? The pen, the Olympus pen or something came along maybe in 2008, 2009. I don't know when. I have no history around Micro Four Thirds. I don't know when they first started. And for me, it was like, well, I'm shooting on a D3 or something, a D700 versus an Olympus Micro Four Thirds. And I just didn't see the reason to, what would be the point to go from a D700 to a D3 to that, except for weight, which at the time, I'm like 30 years old and I'm not worried about that in any way, shape or form. So it's obviously got a huge amount of market share at a time, like around that time, a lot of people, and then, Fuji got into it as well with APS-C. But I do think there's physics coming to play at some point, don't they, Con? I mean, how many more pixels? How are they going to compete? So yeah, look, I don't know. I mean, I've watched a lot of the reviews that have come out from the GH5 and the Olympus, and people love them, but there's always that question that hangs at the end of every review. How much further are they going to push it? And I think it's the Olympus is still at 20. The GH6 got to 24 megapixels. They're really not big
further than that. I agree.
Well, they're not big jumps considering where we're at, but then I could counter argue and say, well, do you need any more megapixels? And a lot of people don't. So
that's true.
Then you might go, okay, well, what is the threat? And the threat ultimately might be that 35mm just becomes cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah. And
then, what they do well in the Z system, for example, is, you can put small glass on your 35mm Z6 or Z7 and you can use it in a cropped mode. And so you can have a very small lens and walk around with that sometimes when you're feeling like you just want something very small and light. And then the advantage is you can throw on a larger lens and use it as a 35mm. So ultimately, I think that's more of the Z7 to me is the ultimate Swiss Army knife. It's a tiny camera. It's the same size as a Z6 and a Z5. It's got 45 megapixels. You can use a tiny DX lens on it and still get 20 megapixels or 19.6 or whatever it is. It's really the best of everything. And I think they will become cheaper. That type of camera will get cheaper. And isn't a Z7 like the Olympus and the Fuji are $2,500-3,000 US, and I think a Z7 is probably, what's a Z7 now, Con, in pounds?
Good question. I think it's 1,999 brand new, but there's no point of really buying them brand new anymore. So secondhand ones, they go for less. I mean, if you're looking at secondhand Z7s, you're looking something anything between, let's say, 1,700 to about 1,900 or so. But Z6, I would say, is probably the bargain of the century nowadays, because if you're looking at secondhand ones, well, at least in UK, we sell them Well, for as low as about something like £1,100. So we have one listed at £1,066. So you can have a full frame camera basically for $1,000 and and a change. And basically, why would you want to spend money on Micro Four Thirds? But that's I absolutely agree with you in terms of that. I think 35mm or full frame, is the way to go nowadays. I want to ask you about DX. Nikon has been criticized about lack of lenses on DX and lack of cameras as well. So we only have 2 DX cameras. We have on another side Fuji, who is doing really well with it. And obviously they've done a beautiful thing where they decided not to release full frame cameras. So then you have a bigger gap between medium format and effectively APS-C or DX format. So what do you think? Is that a good thing to, let's say, would you go full frame over DX? Do you think that in terms of value for money, again, you better stick with a full frame sensor?
Well, we're just getting to this point, which we've just kind of illustrated, where you can get great 35mm cameras, and it doesn't matter whether it's from Sony, Nikon, or Canon. They've all got this first generation, or in Sony's case, second or third generation of full frame cameras that are now very affordable. And, pretty much everything from the last, let's say, 4 years shoots 4K. So it doesn't matter whether it's Micro Four Thirds, APS-C, or full frame, they all shoot 4K. And everything is 20 megapixels or more. So I would just say, ultimately, are those smaller formats just going to get pushed out because 35mm just simply becomes so affordable? And then the only argument left is, well, the lenses, they're bigger and they cost more. But I would counter that by saying, yes, you can get a smaller lens and stick it on the front if you want to that day on your 35mm camera, if light is important to you.
If you would be Fuji, if you would be in place of Fuji, would you start to worry about the XF system? Would you start to think about certain way of migration to a bigger format, or would you say they're in a good place and they have 2 different systems that complement each other?
Well, if rumors are anything to go by, they've got a stacked sensor, just like we've seen a backside illuminated stacked sensor, just like we've seen, I think, Olympus, and one of those 2 guys have just done stacked, maybe both, can't remember. That's coming, and there's a rumor that it's going to be 40 megapixels in the next Fuji, but it's a rumor. So who knows? But if that's true, well, I'm really interested to see that pixel density. It's equivalent to like 80 megapixels in a 35mm. So is it really going to be pushing things to breaking point? Is it going to have dynamic range? Is it going to have high ISO capabilities and so on? They're things that are important to me. And by chasing the megapixel race, are they going to be throwing other things out the window? And that's just technology. And you and I, we don't know what technology is coming over the hill. Fuji cameras are loved by many people. They're very loved, and rightly so. They're beautiful cameras. They're highly effective. They look great. They work great. They do everything much the same. So, but look, it will come. Like, I think the ZFC has been a great curveball because it's got the 35mm mount on it, doesn't it? Right? It's got the Z mount. It's retro. It does everything most of the Fujis do, except for maybe the very newest ones with lack of IBIS. And Nikon could do anything with their next step in that space, and it could really be a knockout punch. Because if you think of to the best of my understanding, the ZFC has been very popular.
Yep.
And if that's their first move, what's the second move?
That's
right. And I mean, some of us would like to see a 35mm version of it, but if you're talking about taking on Fuji, well, then you just do an even better, something even better, which would probably have IBIS in it, and just everything else iterates.
Yeah, I think IBIS will come to Nikon DX bodies. I think it's just a matter of them developing one, because it took Fuji some time to develop it, and I'm sure Nikon will be there. What do you think about medium format and the current medium format? We talked a little bit about. I asked you, what do you reckon? Is the small medium format enough of improvement in terms of image quality? And Seth was very vocal about it last time. He said he loves GFX 100S. Do you think, though, that in terms of medium format, we will shift eventually to 645 or 6.6? So do you think it's to come, or do you think we will stick to 33 by 44 sensors for quite some time?
Well, I mean, obviously Hasselblad and Phase One make those larger sensors, and then you pay crazy money.
Yeah.
And most people don't want to spend $40,000-$50,000 on a camera.
Yeah.
My guess is the divide between your Hasselblad, is it X1D?
Yeah, I
and
had a play with one yesterday, but a friend of mine has one, and it's an interesting camera. It's slow, but color science was amazing.
yeah, I mean Hasselblad files are beautiful. I mean, it's only 50 megapixels, so I think in the space that we mostly talk in, which is not Phase One and $50,000 Hasselblads, I don't see, because the optics get too, like the lenses get too big and everything. It's just, and this is like, I think so much of the photography market today is, enthusiasts and semi-professionals, and I can't imagine Hasselblad or Phase One actually sell that many genuine medium format digital cameras, right? I don't know what the numbers are around the world, but I can't imagine it's like more than 10,000 a year or something.
I agree. So you think on consumer level, let's say when, as we say, things are getting cheaper and cheaper, and so you think on consumer levels we won't see those 645 sensors for quite some time, maybe for at least 5 years?
I don't think it'll ever go there, simply because the scale of the optics that sit on the front are expensive. And that's where I think who did it first with that sensor size, the GFX 100 and the Hasselblad? Who was the first to do that? I don't know. Does anyone know out there?
Well, I think there was a Pentax first. They had the Pentax D645D, then they had Pentax Z, and then Fuji came out with their cameras, right. And then they're already now on second generation or something like this. So, and they also released IBIS on those cameras, which is again took them some time because it's a big sensor to handle. But let's say I've got my Near 7 here, and my dream is to have something like this with in digital. So and obviously if you look at the lens is actually quite small. So this is a 43, which is equivalent of 21 millimeter, I think, focal distance. So you reckon this is not going to happen in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Well, who do you want to make that camera?
Good question. Anyone, please.
Yeah. Well, look, optically, that's a small optic you're showing us there, and I don't know much about. So what's the film? Is that 645? Is it?
No, it's 6x7.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah, 6x7, but it's a rangefinder.
It's a Mamiya RB67, basically.
Well, this is there's Mamiya 7. It's a rangefinder style, but obviously they do a huge beautiful RZ67 and even big RB67, basically.
So I tell you what I've explored, Con, is that there's some people on GoFundMe, Indiegogo, and various other sort of fringe websites who kind of make digital backs for my Mamiya RB67, and but they're like 6 megapixels and the wires hang out the side, and it's like I'm not sure if it's going to break after the third usage.
That's true.
This is why for me the medium format Z mount Nikon fits in a happy place in the middle between what look, I bought a proper medium format Hasselblad.
Oh yes,
because I wanted what you're talking about, and I bought it secondhand, but it was still 20 grand. And so this is why I just think it's so killer, the idea of Nikon creating that medium format, because it's a happy middle ground. And I'm just going to be repeating myself, but you can make some of our lenses might already work. You can make a few more lenses. Nikon are so good at it. And I know, I just feel in my heart that people like you and me, and I think there's probably quite a few of us, would just buy it. We wouldn't even think about it. We'd just buy it.
Absolutely. So hypothetically, let's just dream a little bit. So
I love dreaming.
So with a current state of the world and chip shortage, I'm talking about mainly chip shortage right now, because obviously that affects the amount of stuff they can manufacture. So when do you think this is realistic to happen, even if they make one? I don't think, let's say it will happen this year. I think it may take them 3-4 years just to get there, because just to be able to manufacture a separate line, even if you can use the lenses, you may need to release special lenses as well that cover slightly bigger sensor. What do you think is realistic time frame if this happens?
Yeah, it all comes down to, I suppose, Nikon believing there's a market for it. Like no company makes something without thinking there's a market. And we can prove that there's a market because there's the X1D, the GFX 100, the GFX 50. You know, how many GFXs are there? There's about 5 or 6 of them.
Yes.
And there's only like 7 or 9 lenses or something in the GFX range, even after however many years it's been. So there's a market. People love them. They love the X1D. They love, and I also love the other Hasselblad they made where it's just a back with a
the
lens.
907 thing, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I want to buy one of those. Oh yeah, but it's 12 grand. Yeah, okay, I won't.
No cheap.
But I would, and that's just because I would just love. So we know there's a market. Like, we're just doing a business case here. So there's a market, existing market. There's people like us who keep talking about it, and you know, maybe we should both do polls on our channel to see how many people would actually buy it. I did that a couple of years ago.
I wish I would know how to do this, but that's a great idea.
Yeah, I did it a couple of years ago when my channel only had like 3,000 subscribers, so it wasn't very helpful. But it'd be great to do another poll. And then I suppose we'd have to, have to know what's the minimum number for a company to build a new product line. And I don't know if any of us have the answer to that question. And that's it. You know, if you've got to make 100,000 to kick it off, do we think there's 100,000 people that would buy it? Then boom. So
do you think 100,000 people would buy it? I'm not sure though. I know that GFX series does quite well for Fuji, not as well as the Instax range, which is more consumer, but it seems like it's currently has the photographic business a part of. If you take Instax out, GFX seems to be performing better than the DX line. So, you know, even while DX line has more cameras, of course. But do you think 100,000 people would buy a $6,000 Nikon Z medium, let's say, with another $2,500 prime lens or something?
Well, let's start with the fact that I pulled that number out of the proverbial, and you know, it might be 10,000, it might be 50,000, because when it comes to manufacturing, what you might say is, well, we can only sell 50,000, but it's going to make it $1,000 more expensive because we don't get the economies of scale. So I have an idea, Con. I think we should start a petition. We should lobby Nikon. We should simply say, you can either make 2, and we'll pay $1 million for them each, and you know, the more people we get who want to buy one, let's get pre-orders. That's what guys,
please subscribe to the channel, because if you're going to pay 1 million each, we need a lot more subscribers. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there we go. Me too.
And to Matt's channel as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's a business case. But and then for me though, then there's the kind of other side, the other judo side of it is that the Z mount would then become the most crazy universal mount, because you'd have DX 35mm, small medium format. You could buy one set of lenses that covers all sensor sizes, if you choose to buy the medium format lenses, and it just becomes an extraordinarily universal system. And to me, that's a hell of a selling point as a professional, or as a hobbyist, you know, as an artist, as someone who's just having fun. And I really can't, like, you know, we already know they can process a 50 megapixel pipeline at 20 frames per second, right? We're just shy of 50 megapixels. They can do a 50 megapixel sensor, and for me, I'm not looking for megapixels. I'm looking for dynamic range and high ISO, right? So they can do it, and I personally, I've said this before, I personally feel there's a couple of them sitting on a desk somewhere in Japan, and there's, you know, why not? You buy a couple of sensors from Sony, because they're the guys that make these sensors that particular size, and you throw it in there and have a play. They can do it. I mean, you and I could probably almost do it if we got our very best soldering irons out. You know, we could glue one on the, maybe. No, I'm joking.
A bit of nails and a hammer, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's it. It's just, if there's I think that, look, zooming back a bit, it's more about what happens with the world and what happens with photography as a whole. You know, what's the prediction on camera sales over the next 5 years in general? Yeah. You know, will all the camera manufacturers survive? These are actually some of the serious questions that Nikon and people like that would be asking themselves, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Absolutely. We thought COVID and and the chip shortage was an issue, and now we live in a completely different reality right now. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yes.
Someone early in the chat asking if you're still using film, and if you are, what you shoot with it.
I have to apologize. I don't use film anymore. I used film from about 35 mil from about 19 last millennia. 19 how old am I? About 1980 let's
25.
say through. So yeah, 35, that's right. So from about 1980 through to 2004, I used film. And I used to roll my own film, process my own film, and develop the prints. And over a 10-year period, I developed 100,000 prints. And I can go into that in detail if you like, but I really did. It's really true. And I'm done. So I apologize. I deeply apologize. I know it's a great experience, but I have experienced it, and every single aspect of it, except actually manufacturing film. But I've done it all, and I've done it a lot. So, okay. And
it's painful to hear for me, but actually, and what I'm going to ask you as well is going to be painful to hear for me. But what do you think is going to happen to film? So, be honest. You don't need to offend anyone. But what do you think? Do you think we're in a phase where film is just becoming more popular, but it's going to die out soon?
You could have said that would happen to records. They've come back and they've hung in there. Look, the only reason for me around film is just the environmental side of it. But then anyone could very quickly argue driving down the street to buy a liter of milk is way worse than using film. I don't want to get too serious, but I think there's a lot of questions humanity needs to ask themselves around the things we need to play with versus, what we should be doing. But I can't imagine film's footprint on the world is that big a deal, but kind of is when you start to think about the volumes, how much we churn through when you start to think, especially the motion picture industry, more than, they go through 400 feet canisters every, in 16 mil film, 400 foot, if I remember correctly, last 6 minutes or something. So
that's true. That's what keeps the film alive at the moment, not the actually film sales for photographers. It's actually sales films for Hollywood, effectively, that carries the film at the moment. Yeah.
I mean, some directors still demand to shoot on film. So look, I've always been a nerd, and I've always been into new technology, and I mean, Con, you probably know more about how film is going than I do, and how many film cameras you sell, and has it gone up and has it gone down? Because I don't have any insights into that world at all. I mean, film's pretty hard to buy here in Melbourne. There might be just a handful of places, whereas it used to be in supermarkets, right? It used to be everywhere. What's your take on it? Is there more or less film cameras going out the door?
It's definitely picked up. I can tell you, when I started to work at Grace, which was about, I think it was about 12 years ago, we were selling a lot of manual focus lenses to videographers and cinematographers. And we had companies who could order 20, 35 millimeter, let's say, f2.8 lenses, just because they would need to basically put them on their cameras and get the same results, etc. So we had that at the beginning. And then, it's D90 came out. There was the first DSLR, and then 5D Mark II, which, revolutionized the videography on DSLRs. And a lot of those Canon guys and Sony and Red guys, they would buy Nikon glass because it was a lot cheaper than buying something like Zeiss, and quality was fantastic. So we have that at the beginning. And I would say in the last 3-4 years, we start to sell a lot more the glass and film cameras to photographers. So it seems that we've reached the point where people started to have a bit of nostalgia, where they would say, yes, I have my digital camera, but I want to come back to the way of shooting film more than anything else. I think for a lot of people, it's therapeutic. I mean, the reason why I shoot film for my personal projects nowadays is because we do a lot of digital stuff for YouTube channel, and we talk a lot of megapixels and things like this. And I really want to kind of move away from that and enjoy the process of taking pictures. So that for me, it's this way more than anything else. And obviously, I like medium format. So the 6x7 negatives, it's very hard to get on digital. And it's just, I wouldn't say we can talk about depth of field. I don't think that's the case. I think it's just the rendering of the lenses, et cetera, et cetera. But thinking about the future, as you say, vinyl, picked up quite a bit. You can even buy now cassettes as well. So I don't know how this is doing, but vinyl definitely increased like almost like 1,000%, like year on year in the last 3 years. So film, it seems like Kodak, I just read another day that Kodak is planning to actually start another plant. So that's good news. The bad news is we are not on a level we were even 20 years ago. So it's just, they used to work 24/7, and they used to have something like 10 factories in also all countries in the world or something like this, So I think three factories in China, somewhere else, and obviously in the United States. They're not on the same level. Even now, if they need to run one stock that is not going to be very popular, they say, okay, if you're going to do a production once every 3 months, there's actually need to be a person to maintain the production and make sure that the chemistry doesn't change, et cetera, et cetera. So it becomes a lot more expensive to produce. So it is much smaller. The good news is we have now a part of Kodak, Fuji. I don't know what to think about Fuji because they keep discontinuing film, but Kodak is definitely pushing film and they can't make enough. But then we have a company called Adex, which is, I think, German manufacturer. They manufacture black and white film. They just said that they made the film back in the day and it was sitting in the fridge. So now they're selling it and all the proceeds will go towards the funding of a new color film. I think we got a company called Orwell, I think, if I'm not mistaken. They talking about manufacturing new color film for movie production. So there are lots of things happening, but I don't think we're going to be anywhere near the level we used to be. So it's going to become more expensive and it's going to become one of those niche things that going to exist. They're not going to disappear, but it seems like it's going to go to a level that's going to be quite expensive to shoot film. And the problem was, with I'm rambling a little bit, but back in the day you could buy film cameras for like 100-200 pounds. So I would say buy your film camera, it's reasonably cheap, the glass is cheap, go spend money on the film. So you're going to spend, let's say if you're going to spend 5,000 pounds, let's say the price of Z9, you can get FM2 for 200 pounds and then 5 years worth of film to shoot. And that, I would say, a good way of saying, okay, you're going to spend about the same as you would buy on digital camera, etc. But nowadays the prices have gone up quite significantly. So if you want to buy something especially if you're looking at medium format, like my Mi S7 now going for something like 3,000 pounds on eBay, which is ridiculous. Wow. They used to go for 500 pounds back in the day. I got my RZ6-7 for 400 pounds, including 3 lenses. Now I can sell it for 2,000 on eBay. So now when the prices are so expensive, then you start thinking, well, if the equipment is expensive and film is expensive, and then you may need to either scan it, with your DSLR, which means you need to have a digital setup, or you need to spend money for discontinued scanner. Again, with something like Nikon Coolscan 9000 is going for like 2,000 pounds on eBay.
Wow, so I should sell mine.
Here you go. You're definitely going to make some money on it. But it becomes a very niche. So it's not as I would say film expensive, equipment is not. No, now everything is becoming expensive and Kodak increased their prices. So it becomes a niche of people who really enjoy that. Obviously, we have this good thing happening now that the young people go into film, it becomes a trend, which is a good thing. How long is it going to last, though? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, did film almost completely die out and then it came back like records? Yeah, so it feels to me like it's back. And look, I've got a great deal of respect for sort of the slow food movement. Let's call it the slow film movement. People are slowing down. They're walking around. They've got a roll of 36, or in the case of your Mamiya, you're shooting 8 frames or something.
Yeah, 10.
And that is a beautiful thing. And so there is nothing wrong with having 2 versions of photography. The digital one, which is whatever it is, and then the film one, which is like the slow film movement. Let's coin it that tonight. It's the slow film movement. It slows us down and makes us think harder about our composition, our lighting, and that's fine. Now, of course, you could do that with the digital. Of course you can. So yeah, I would just go full circle again. I mean, tell us all why do you shoot film? I mean, you said it's because you don't want to talk about megapixels, but is there something about the outcome?
Yeah. I mean, I think, as you say, let's nail this term. I think that those things shouldn't be mutually exclusive. I think they can coexist, and that's what people don't really like. When we start talking about film and we start to see the comments how people hate shooting film and they're so happy to shoot digital. in my opinion, you can shoot both, and that's what I do. I shoot both. So, if there's a commercial job, I would shoot it digitally. So if I do a project for myself, I would shoot it on film, or even let's say some portraiture, I would shoot digitally as well as I take some shots with film camera. So speaking, let's say 35 millimeter film, for me personally, I would say you can do better with digital nowadays. So just because, you got the same size of, the sensor as film, you get clean images. Definitely with the film, you get, the colors that stock produces. So if you want to go for that effect, that's where you want to, that's what you want to do. Medium format is very different for me. So that's the thing. If you want to shoot 645 plus, and I genuinely, I shoot 6x7, so I don't do 645, or 6x6. So 6x7 is that's where I want to be. And the files coming from, let's say, RZ67 or my Mia 7, they're beautiful, and the lenses are fantastic. That's what I wouldn't get with digital. And that's, I don't want to talk about, as you say, like, I don't want it become a kind of format war where we say, oh, what's the difference between medium format and 35 millimeters? It's not that. It's just the negatives that I get out of it. It's, they're beautiful. They're beautiful. The problem
I have to say, I bought an RB67 in I don't know, 1995 or something, and I still adore the negatives that come out of it. And I believe it's because, and again, there's probably someone more technical than me in out there, but that larger field of view actually captures the world in a different way than smaller formats, and so it actually is rendered differently. Yeah. It's actually a different look. It's not that it's sharper, it's that it's different. And that's one of the reasons I want larger sensors in digital cameras. It's that look. And again, to repeat, that's why I bought a Hasselblad, proper Hasselblad medium format digital camera. So we're on the same page about that look. So, and you're right. I mean, you've been able to achieve that with your Mamiya. So it's all good, mate. It's all good, whether it's a digital or...
Change.org petition for Nikon to release a Z medium camera.
There you go. That's exactly what we've got to do. That's what we've got to get going. We need 100,000 signatures. We'll start the process. We should both mention it once a month on our channels.
Absolutely, absolutely.
See how many people we can get to sign up for it. But look, to answer your question, I think film will hang in there for a while to come, unless something happens from a manufacturing perspective that's not to do with want, but something else, as in absolutely the community's want.
Exactly. If you start to see the demand, I'm sure that they will start to look into that. Yeah. I think it's a good place to wrap up our conversation. We've been a little bit longer than usual, so I don't want to wait you for too long. I'm sure it's already over. It's after midnight, isn't it, in Melbourne right now?
Yes. And so someone, Jerry, I'm not bored. It's just a bit late here, mate. That's all. And I had a big day. So someone called Jerry said I look bored. I wasn't bored. I was intently listening to you, Con. Come on. Anyway, it's all good. It's fabulous.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you, Matt. I really enjoy our conversations. I think it's always great to hear people's perspective on different things. And, your experience with Nikon equipment and with other brands, it is invaluable. And, I personally think that the more people hear different people's opinions, the more we'll have much bigger picture of what's happening in the photography industry with equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. And I totally agree with you, Con. So thank you. Look after yourself, and we will talk very soon.
Fantastic. Well, Matt's channel is in the description under the video, so do check it out. Thanks everyone for joining us early today. We wish you have a great weekend. And if you missed us, unfortunately, just watch and record. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. All the best. Bye-bye.